Well, hey everybody, it's Dr. Sasheen. Thanks for tuning in to SYGD, the podcast. Divorce may be messy, but you don't have to be. In this, our second season, join me as I set fires to lies, half truths, and distortions that come along the way with the divorce journey and inspire you, motivate you to move past them quickly to live your best life. So set your clocks and your calendars and tune in each week. Welcome to season 2. The doctor is in. Well, hey everyone, it's Dr. Sasheen, and it's so great to be back for season 2. So You're Getting Divorced, the podcast, in case you haven't noticed, has been shortened just a hair to SYGD. So that's how we'll be referring to it here in season 2, but it's still the same. So You're Getting Divorced, the podcast. And welcome back. It's been a great break. 3 weeks off here in the United States. We've had a lot happen in that time, and it was really good to spend some time with the family, work on some things, change a few things around here behind the scenes, but I have missed being here. So let's get started. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So the title, if you saw, are 5 simple truths to freedom that I learned going through my own process of divorce. Long title. Not quite what it says on the top, but that's what it's all about. And I want to talk a bit about the things that came to me in some of my darkest hours, going through the transition from being married to being a single mom with a small child. And I hope that if you're out there listening, that these help to bring you some kind of comfort and solace on the road as you transition yourself from where you thought you were going to be to where you now can decide where you're going to be. It's a journey of one small step at a time, and these 5 simple truths came in the fire, in the furnace of a marriage that wasn't going great, and a complex process of planning the next phase of my life while at the same time separating from the first phase of my life, or at least that phase, not the first phase. So after we come back from a word from our sponsors, we will dive into 5 simple truths to freedom, things I learned on the road to divorce. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Sasheen from So You're Getting Divorced, the podcast, here to talk to you about Anchor and the ease at which you too can launch and start your own podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, let me just break it down for you. Here is the 411. Number 1, it's free. This is a great way to get started if you've never done podcasting, or if you're a pro and you really like the idea of using your phone or your computer to get your podcast going without all the hassle, because number 2, they will distribute it for you to places like Pocket Casts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. That's a pretty sweet deal. Next, you can make money while you're doing your podcast with no minimum listenership, and that's pretty darn spectacular. So, follow these instructions. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, so thanks for sticking around, and let's just jump into it. So, the first simple truth that I think was probably the most profound, all 5 of these are pretty profound for me, but the first one really was born out of an understanding that there is just, marriage is hard, but it's not actually supposed to be one battle after the other. So the first simple truth that I have is that it's always going to be something. It's always going to be something. When you're in a relationship with another human being, there's no end of things that you can find to be upset about. There are no end of worries and concerns, complications, ups, downs, sideways, lost jobs, new babies, new homes, aging parents, sick kitties, all kinds of things that are happening in a relationship. And the fact of the matter is, there's not really a reason to fight about all of those things. And there isn't really a good excuse for why we let so many things get in the way. This was a hard one to really face for myself as I was going through the transition process of ending my marriage, because the number of excuses that we come up with to justify our behavior is in direct proportion to the amount of stuff we just don't want to have to deal with. So, I mean, my marriage wasn't terribly long, but I do know that in the course of that short marriage, there are a lot of things that neither one of us really wanted to deal with. And so we came up with any number of reasons why we needed to engage in some silly surface behaviors because we just didn't really want to deal with the underlying issues. And the stuff that you don't want to face is why you're getting divorced. Let's face it. The stuff you just don't want to have to deal with either anymore or at all is the reason that you are transitioning your life out of this relationship. And so the fact of the matter is that stuff is always there. It is always something. It is always going to be something. And what it really boils down to, especially if you are contemplating life after divorce, relationships after divorce, thinking ahead to what you want in the next relationship, which, by the way, you are well within your rights to do so. Please don't let anybody make you feel bad for thinking that you might actually find happiness again, because you will. But what it boils down to is that at some point in time, you're going to have to determine how you're going to deal with what's happening at any given moment. Okay? At any given moment, that there is something going on that's going to make you crazy, trip your whatever. And every relationship has landmines. And because we know every relationship has landmines and that it is always going to be something, the freedom here is recognizing that you don't actually have to keep reliving that same something over and over and over again. You know, one of the key lessons that I learned when I was going through my own divorce was that I just didn't want to have to deal with some of this baggage again. I didn't want to have to look up and go, okay, I'm in another relationship and I'm kind of having the same basic issues, the same basic problems. And I talk in season 1 a lot of those issues of economy, personal economy, money, issues of kids and trust, issues of communication. And we'll talk about a lot of that stuff this season too, because those are some things that are always going to be coming up. And you got to figure out where in the relationship you're going to decide to make your stand because it's important to you, and where in the relationship you're going to just let it go. Let it go. Because it's just not worth continuing to fight about. And if you continue to fight about it and make excuses about why you're not facing it, then what you're basically signing up for is the same relationship over and over and over again. And I don't know about you, I don't happen to want to relive my marriage that I got out of so many years ago now. I don't want to relive that again. But I also don't want to focus on what I don't want. What I want to focus on is what I do want. And the number one simple truth of it's always going to be something reminds me that it may always be something, but it doesn't always have to be a thing. It doesn't always have to be a thing. Something doesn't have to turn into a thing. So if I can't figure out my money story or my intimacy story or my marriage story, my relationship story, if I can't figure out how I want to play my role in that, then it does always become something in a relationship that I'm always working out on somebody else. And that's not fun. But if I can take the time, if you can take the time to really figure out how you fit into the narrative and what you want the narrative to look like around your role in a relationship, then though it may always be something going on, it is not always a thing. It's not always a big thing, and you just move on when it doesn't need to be dealt with because you've already dealt with it. You just move on and you find your peace and you realize you don't need to make it something other than exactly what it is, which is a non-issue in the grand scheme of things. So that's number 1. It's always going to be something. Number 2. Boy, let's talk about family and friends and people in your life as you move through your transition into the next phase. Simple truth to freedom number 2, you are a reflection of the people whose opinion matters the most to you. Let me just say that again. You are a reflection of the people whose opinions matter the most to you, not the people who give you facts because you may love them, but you may not be attached to them. You are held to people whose opinions matter to you. They matter. You spend time with all kinds of people, right? We have all kinds of people who float in and out of our lives, some of them really important to us, some of them very transient. But the reality is, not all of them matter. Even in the tight circle of family, not all family members' opinions are weighted equally to us. And so when we start to think about who we're emotionally attached to, and how that emotional attachment makes us feel in the world, you can begin to see the influence of those people in our world. We absorb the opinions of people. We absorb the opinions of who we are from people. And we absorb how we think we should act from people. And because of that, we need to determine, and this is really important as you come out of a relationship, especially if it was a bad one, we really need to determine if it's a good idea to own people's opinions about us, because sometimes we are hanging on to opinions about us from people that we don't even like, from people that we wouldn't necessarily give the time of day to, except that we have this emotional attachment to them. This could be your mother, your father, your impending ex-spouse, your children, any number of people, your best friend from whatever, your best girlfriend, your best guy friend, whomever. What's important is that because we absorb opinions from other people and those opinions are so important to us, we need to examine our tribe, especially as you're coming out of a marriage, because the friends that you still have may be great friends now, but they may not be the ones that you're going to go further on your way with, and ones that you maybe weren't as close to because you got married and you kind of drifted apart, or you met during the marriage and now you're getting divorced and you're not sure where you're going to stand, or any number of permutations on how the relationship formed. Those people that you may not feel very tight with right now may be the very ones that you're still friends with 10 years from now, whose opinions matter more. Now, here's the thing. We hang on to people because we're used to them, because we are used to how we feel when we're with them. And that is hard, because sometimes how we feel with them is really crappy. It's terrible. We don't like it, but we're going through something so hard over here, this thing called divorce, that the thought of losing this thing over here, which may be a really crappy friendship, it just makes us tired. We don't want to do that work too. So we have to lose everything. And the road to freedom through this one is that if you don't lose all of the bad relationships, then ultimately you, again, going back to that, it's always going to be something, you end up repeating the pattern with the next person that you're with, in the next relationship that you're with. And because you hang on to people who you're used to, but who may just not be good for you, because you hang on to them, because it's just too hard to shift everything at once, what you start to find is that you got rid of the ex, but you can't move on to the next of anything, because you still have people in your life who have the same energy, who have the same patterns, who make you feel the same way. And that sameness can be intoxicating and a blanket over us that feels weighted down, but familiar. And when we think that we're lifting it, and we begin to feel lighter, we begin to think maybe these opinions aren't really what I want, then we start to sabotage ourselves, because again, the thought of having to change so many relationships at one time is exhausting. And we just want somebody to be there who knows us. But the reality is, the path to freedom here is to remember that the people whose opinions matter the most to you should be people who lift you up, should be people who feed into you, who value you, who reflect back to you the goodness in yourself, the prosperity in yourself, the abundance in yourself, the light in yourself. And for the person out there who's like, well, everybody can't be all, rah, rah for you, someone's going to tell you the truth. The world is going to tell you the truth whether you want to hear it or not. So you know what? You actually do need people who want to rah-rah for you. You actually do need to surround yourself with people who care enough to say, I'm going to make it my mission to see that you don't have a bad day. Because the world's already going to set out to make you have a bad day, right? Any number of things can make you have a bad day. Any number of things. You're going to set out to make yourself not have a good day because we self-sabotage all the time. And so the idea that somehow the people around you whose opinion matters to you and who you become a reflection of should hurt you is crazy. But it's something that we have been taught is the truth. We have been taught that through criticism and tearing down and pain is growth. That's where real growth takes place. And the divorce process would have you believe that the fights and the arguments and the jockeying for things and custody and money and all of that stuff, it's so ingrained in the process that we don't know anything about joy while we're going through it. Nothing about joy. And when we get to Liberation Day, which is what I call the day when you not necessarily sign the divorce papers, but the day you feel free finally, whatever day that might be, whether it's the day you sign on the dotted line or you move into the new place or you get to the next city and you realize that this is it, whatever marks Liberation Day for you, that day, when you get to that day, you should be surrounded by people who have been cheering you on along the way. And if you're not, then you need to get a better circle of friends. Because the simple truth here is that if you're going to reflect opinions, reflect the best ones, not the worst ones, not the ones that make you feel like shit, but the ones that make you shine so brightly that you realize that divorce, hard or easy, was just another door that you walked through to get to where you're going. Speaking of doorways, simple truth number 3. This one is going to be a little controversial. Roll with it. Feel free to cut me off. Simple truth number 3. You will find your God, and that is all that matters. So, for my people out there who believe in God, this one's for you. For my atheists, this one's also for you. Sometimes when you're going through a transition, you're going to find that you want to turn to something to help you get through it. And that something may be religion. It may be any variation on religion or spirituality. Hopefully it's not something that's going to hurt your body or hurt your soul or hurt your spirit. But what matters is sometimes you will find that as you are going through the trials of divorce, that your beliefs about things begin to change. And that can be very difficult to explain to people who've believed with you a certain way, that you might be changing how you view the world, how you see the lens of God, how you see the lens of spirit, looking on your new reality. Sometimes the God of your childhood is not the God of the rest of your life. And sometimes it is. But when you're going through the fire of something, and this is one of the beautiful teachings of many of the spiritual traditions, when you are going through the fire of something, when pain is in front of you and you're reaching for something, you may find that you reach for something that you've never reached for before, whether that's going from following an Abrahamic religion to following an Eastern or following none, or you may find yourself going more fully and more deeply into the fires of the faith that you are already a part of. Or you may find that this idea of God doesn't work for you anymore. It just doesn't. And this is one of the simple truths, because so much of life transition, divorce, separation, especially when takes place within the confines of some religious traditions, can be couched with so much guilt and so much shame and so much angst and animosity, and so many emotions get tied up in it. And some of those emotions are directly tied to how we perceive God sees us, how we perceive the people who follow the same God that we do, how they see us, going back to number 2 again. it's so tied into the thing we've been raised to believe is true and right about the world based on this perspective of how we think that we are seen in the world by a God, that it can be difficult, especially if you're really into the faith. It can be difficult when the shifting sands of this transition have you questioning it. Have you questioning where it fits in your life and how you're supposed to deal with this thing, the reality of this thing, and not just the mental or intellectual exercise of it. Because I think one of the problems that people have is that it's very easy to intellectually walk through an exercise, but until you're feeling it, till you're in the moments of it, until you're watching the light fade on certain dreams that you might have had, until you're in there, you don't necessarily know how you're going to need God, whatever God means for you. You don't really know how you're going to need it or what it's going to look like. And it can be really hard in the moment to realize what I believed about this thing that I'm now experiencing firsthand doesn't match. It's not helping me. I can't use it. And you may begin to search for something different. And so I think it's really important to honor and respect the fact that you will find your God. You will find whatever spiritual force, whatever universal feeling, whatever soul connection that matters to you. And that really is all that matters. You will find a version of it that works for you. And it may be so completely different than the version that you're used to, or it may be so completely more of the version that you're used to, or it may be no version at all because it just doesn't work for you. But what happens here is there's a freedom in realizing that this is part of the process of transition. This is part of the growth process. It's not necessarily how you might think about it now, but your relationship with your spirit, with your soul, with your power, with your higher power, whatever you're going to call it, with your God, whatever you call it, that relationship, that personal relationship, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. The one thing I will say is, as I was going through my own process, what I realized was that I didn't necessarily believe in the guilt process in the way that I had been raised about so many things. And so I had to reevaluate because I wasn't feeling terribly guilty about not wanting to live in misery. And I had to reevaluate and think about my own definitional understanding of obligation and duty, because that's the kind of religion that I was raised in. And I had to step back and think about what it really meant to love something, and then also what it really meant to love myself, to honor and respect where I was, and to recognize that I'd always been someone who asked a lot of questions. I'm by nature, I'm someone who needs to ask why, to search for the why. It's in the process of the searching that I'm most interested in. The final answer may come, it may not, may take a while, may come really quickly. That's fine. But for me, the process of the question is where I find my growth, where I find my path. And so when you're asking why in the trenches of something like divorce, and you're working through the whys of it, what you may find, and what I found, is that I wasn't engaging in it in certain ways that I had thought I would engage with it because of the background of my own religion. And because of that, I had made some big shifts in how I viewed myself in relation to the religion that I espoused at the time. And so you may find that this happens to you as well. And that is freedom. There's a freedom to recognizing that you will find your feet, that you will find your faith, you will find your footing, and that in the end, that is what matters. That is what matters. Being beholden to a dogma or a doctrine, didn't mean to say dogma, to a doctrine that doesn't serve you in the place that you are now is crazy. It's like being beholden to a relationship that no longer serves anybody involved in it, but just being beholden to it because that's just what you do. Well, we've seen the results of that in too many lives to know that that's a bad idea. The same thing is true about God's, however you choose to define it. So simple truth number 3 is that you will find your God. And that is all that matters. Okay, so simple truth number 4 is probably my favorite. It was probably the easiest one to come by, but it's also the one that tends to cause a little bit more controversy because, controversy is just kind of how I roll here. But it goes on the heels of, let me give the backstory here. It goes on the heels of this idea that started when I started my very first YouTube video. One of my very first YouTube videos was this particular topic, which was the 5 simple truths. And I started it because I really wanted to get away from the notion that the only real growth is through pain, and that somehow painful experiences and scarcity experiences are just held in, and we hold them in higher esteem. We place more value on them. We place more gravitas, if you will, on the story of being without, of being down, of coming back from, of the hard road through. And there's a kind of piety in poverty and in poverty consciousness that we put onto people. And especially when you go through the transition of divorce, you find a lot of people just assume that pleasure and joy are just not, you don't get to feel those things. You don't get to be happy. You don't get to enjoy the freedom of not having to split your paycheck with another person anymore. You don't get to feel good about any part of the process. You're supposed to feel bad. You're supposed to be sad. You're supposed to feel demoralized and dehumanized, and some parts of the process of divorce, some of the nuts and bolts are set up, I think, exclusively to make you feel that way, to make you feel like you have done something that is completely baseless, and you should be ashamed of yourself for having any pleasure in this process. Simple truth number 4 is that luxury and pleasure are your birthright. You are entitled to feel good about your life. You are expected to feel good about your life. Everything is amazing. Everything is pleasurable. Every piece of life is a feast. And we believe that as children. We wholeheartedly believe it as children until we are taught that this is not true. We don't teach little babies that things are terrible. We teach toddlers that things start to get terrible, to save them from hurting themselves. But we don't teach little children that everything isn't amazing. And then at some point, we start teaching them the very opposite of what we asked them to believe, right? So we want you to believe in the wonder of life and fairy tales. So we give you the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. And we make big productions about things that are whimsical and fantastic. And then about 10 or 11, maybe a little later, we say, you can't believe in those things. It's silly to believe in that thing still. That's not true. Those things aren't real. And we like literally yank the pleasure out of life. We start siphoning it off every year, a little more and a little more. We begin to siphon it off, and siphon it off until finally we're adults and we feel like the only real way to gain pleasure is through the painful experiences or the over-the-top experiences, because we've taken away the idea that every part of our life is pleasurable and luxurious and amazing, and we should love all of it through that lens, right? We should love all of it. And the other thing that we do is we start attaching this stigma to money at the same time. Now, one of the hard things about going through a divorce that's so tough, especially for women, and especially for women with children, is the money issue. And I talk about this a lot. I'm going to talk about this a lot this season too. But it's the money issue. It's the idea that money can't buy you happiness. But here's the thing. Money does buy us happiness. It buys us experiences. And in experiences, we find pleasure. And when we find pleasure, we are happier. That's it. It's much easier to get people to do something when it feels good to them. So think about your children. It's so much easier to get your kid to do something if you give them an incentive, something that they want, something pleasurable. The same thing holds true with adults. It's so much easier to get people to work on something if you give them something in return, something that they want, an incentive, something that brings them pleasure. It is much more difficult to get people to do things with the promise of pain, right? With the promise of a retraction of something, that you're going to take away something, you're going to do something to them. They might do it for you, but as soon as they can stop doing it, they're going to, and they're not going to give it their all. Your life is like this. Your life is this. In your life, why on earth are you not giving yourself incentives to go be good, to go be happy, to go be wonderful, to go explore, to go have and have and have and do? Why, with access to everything, we teach people that it's better to starve themselves than to go find a feast that fills them up. I used to, still do, but I used to watch musicals all the time. I was a theater and choir kid in high school, and I've always loved the theater for so long. And I can remember the first time I saw Mame. I didn't see it on the stage. I think I saw the movie. But one of the things that she says in Mame is, life is a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death. And that stuck with me. It was so long ago that I saw this. I think I might have been in middle school, high school. Anyway, but I heard her say this and I was like, that is so accurate. That is so accurate, because I had grown up with the ideas of scarcity, that there's never really enough. And a lot of us grow up like that. And we pass this along to our kids, and we bring this into our relationships. And so this is where it comes back around to this transitioning of divorce thing, right? We bring it into our relationships, this idea of scarcity. Couples fight about money all the time, right? They always, money, sex, and kids. That's what couples are fighting about. And when it comes to money, usually, this is a generalization, so please don't send me some comments that I'm awing everybody. This is a generalization, but usually it's one partner saying, we spend too much, and one partner saying, we don't spend enough. And they're fighting about basically definitions of scarcity. And neither of them are necessarily thinking about the pleasure that experiences bring, the pleasure that life is supposed to have, the absolute feast that is available to us all the time. We literally have access to everything that we could possibly want in the entire world. And if it's not out there yet, it's coming, because people are dreaming up new things all the time. And instead of enjoying it, we will fight to the death to embrace our denial of pleasure. We will fight to the death to embrace our denial of pleasure. And we will fight to the death to prevent other people from giving us pleasure, from giving us luxury, and from being amazed at life. Like, we have a severe distrust of people who are happy within their own skin, and a severe disliking for people who are literally enjoying the fruits of life. And some of it is monetary, but mostly it's their experiences that we hate. We hate them for their experiences, because we've decided that experiences of those sorts, the kind that make you feel pleasure, there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. And it's because life and circumstances, parents and teachers, societies and culture tend to focus on the pain. They tend to focus on the path of pain to get to where you're going, and not the path of pleasure. And history is full of the path of pain, right? Let's be clear. Some of it really horrible, and I would minimize none of it. And there is pain, and there's growth through pain. There is growth there. There is always growth through pain. But it is very difficult to be on the path of pleasure and the path of pain at the same time. And when you start believing, especially when the path is hard, when you start believing that your birthright, that you are owed pleasure, and that you are owed luxury, and that you are owed happiness, and that you are owed because it is your birthright, that you came into the world whole, happy, and complete, that you came into the world seeking pleasure above all other things, pleasure and comfort. It's all a baby wants, pleasure and comfort. Feed me, play with me, keep me dry, keep me safe. Pleasure and comfort. When you remember that that's how you came in the world and that you're owed those things, then you can begin to look at your life and go, where is it that I am not getting that? And why can't I have it there? And if I can't have it there, why do I go there? Why do I need that? Do I really want that? Or do I want something that gets me closer to feeling whole, happy, and free to be pleasurable again? And as you go through the divorce process, it's a time to ask yourself, are you going to be the kind of person who now seeks the pleasure of life, or are you going to carry the weight of the pain with you everywhere that you go? Everywhere that you go. Will it become that your life can only be defined by the pain of what you left behind? Or can your life actually be defined by the pleasure that you now find in your new life? And this is the rub, right? People want you to be sad that you've gotten a divorce, and divorce is sad, but it doesn't have to be sad 24/7, 365. And it doesn't have to be sad for 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. It can be sad for you as long as it can be sad for you, because let's remember, people who are going through a divorce have been grieving for a long time. They started the grieving process before they probably said, I want a divorce. And so the idea that somehow the grief and the process and the pain of this must linger well beyond the final signing of the paper, well beyond the final key turn in of the house, well beyond, is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I, for one, think that we do a disservice to people by embracing the idea that your pain over something is where we'll comfort you, but your pleasure over something is where we won't tolerate that. We won't support you. We won't uplift you and say, yes, good for you for feeling good about yourself. But we sure will say, gosh, let me hold your hand so that you can continue to feel bad about yourself. And so a simple truth to freedom is that when you believe that luxury and pleasure are your birthright, then you start to seek out experiences that bring you the feeling of pleasure, the feeling of luxury in your life, the feeling of happiness and wholeness. And you might find that you get through those painful times a whole lot faster because you remember that I'm not here to suffer. And learning doesn't have to come through pain. It can come through pain. It can come through pleasure, definitely. And it can come from recognizing that pain is temporary and I do not have to wallow in it. I can learn from it, learn this experience, and move on so I don't have to repeat it. And I can go back to finding the good stuff, the stuff that makes me happy, the stuff that makes me whole. Which leads me to the final simple truth on your road to freedom. So, we've talked about religion. We've talked about it's always going to be something. We've talked about those people whose opinions you are a reflection of. And we've talked about why pleasure and luxury are in fact your birthright. Number 5, save the best for last, is you don't owe anyone anything. You don't owe anyone anything. I talked about this under religion, finding your own God, but I'm going to hammer it home for the next 3 to 4 minutes. The constant companion of guilt will have you believing that you owe someone for your existence. The constant companion, the drumbeat of guilt that you will hear from people, from societies, from organizations, will have you believing truly, and we believe it at our core. And this is why so many people cannot embrace number 4, the idea of pleasure being our birthright, because the guilt, the feeling of saying yes to yourself and no to other people and no to other experiences and no to anything that doesn't serve you becomes more than we can bear. Absolutely more than we can bear. Therapy sessions are full because people cannot say yes to themselves. And they cannot do it because they think they owe somebody, somewhere, something for their very existence. It's tough. Couple that with this intense belief that if we are just good enough, we will be rewarded for all of this guilt we're carrying, all this pain we're enduring, and all this good behavior that we're being on. We will be rewarded. Someone will look at us and go, you are rewarded, good and faithful servant. If you're religious, we know where that comes from. Or the person or people whose opinions that we care about the most will finally say, oh yes, you did well. Or our children will say, okay, it's okay that you divorced. It was the right thing to do. Or that spouse that we're still trying to get to appreciate us will say, I was wrong. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. How did I let you go? Let me just say now, this is going to end up with a rating on it. This is bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Constant companion of guilt and the double whammy of trying to be good simply does one thing: that keeps you firmly looking for someone else's validation of your very existence. Period. It keeps you playing a role always in someone else's story for your life because you don't get to run your own. We keep people locked into a narrative, locked into a certain way of doing things when we allow them to tell us that we owe them something, that we owe them for our existence, that we should thank them and we should be eternally grateful to them for their whatever in our lives. Now, does this mean that we're not grateful? No, I am a firm believer in gratitude. In fact, I keep a gratitude journal and I write in it every morning. Every morning, I list 10 things that I am grateful for. And some of those things are the relationships that I have that are built on mutual respect, admiration and understanding, love and affection. What I do not have on my gratitude list are a list of people that I owe for my very existence. Are a list of people who I feel like if I don't behave a certain way, act a certain way, believe a certain way, then I've let them down, that I have disappointed them. But a lot of us, a lot of people, a lot of women especially, feel as though they owe someone for how their marriage is turning out or not turning out. A lot of families feel like they owe other organizations, entities, and families explanations for how they do their family or don't do their family. This thing about owing someone is so difficult because it leads to behaviors that we just should never put up with. Because at the root, when you owe someone, then you give them ownership. You give ownership over you to someone else. And that breeds resentment. And you see it in relationships all the time. And it blows up like a Roman candle in divorce transitions. The resentment of feeling as though you never were free to be you, that you were never appreciated for the uniqueness that you brought, and that you felt like people feel like they owe their spouses, or spouses feel like they should that they should be getting more gratitude for all that they've done. This idea of ownership, of feeling like you owe somebody or someone owes you, means that you're never free. You're never free to feel what you need to feel. You're never free to be who you need to be, because someone always has the right to demand of you what you may not freely want to give. Let me say that for you again. When we feel ownership and we give ownership away because we feel like we owe someone, then we give people permission to demand things of us that we may not actually want to have to give them. We may not actually want to have to do them. We may not actually want to have to feel what they want us to feel. But because we think we owe someone, then we give away so many things. And in the end, we resent them for it. And we begin to make everything else, especially those people, the reason that we're so unhappy. And the consequences are that we don't ever have the life that we want. We never do. And so I'm here to break this for you and say, number one, you don't owe anyone anything. It's a hard lesson, but it goes back to number 4, where pleasure is our birthright. When pleasure is our birthright, the only person that we owe, the only person who has ownership over us is us. It also means that we accept the fact that our consequences, in fact, reside squarely on our own shoulders. And isn't that fantastic? Isn't it fantastic to realize that if I do this and it's great, I get all the benefits. And if I do this and it's terrible, I get all the blame. And that's okay. That's legitimately okay. Because if I get all the blame, that also means if I can turn it around or make lemonade out of lemons, then oh my gosh, I will have this amazing story to tell, and it's still all mine. Now, does that mean that you're going to drag everyone through the muck and the mire as you are living your pleasurable birthright? No, because with pleasure comes responsibility. With pleasure comes an understanding of the consequences of our actions. With pleasure comes the idea that because I don't actually owe anyone for my happiness, what I have to do and choose to do to be happy is on me. And part of my happiness is not hurting the people that I love. That's not making me happy. Why would I do that? So don't let someone say to you, oh, well, your selfishness is what's hurting people. No, your selfishness is what's saving people. Because chances are when you are selfish with yourself and you put your happiness first and you put your life first and you decide that the only person that you owe on the planet is you, you begin to fix your life in such a way that it overflows with love and caring and affection for other people because you are so full and you are so filled up and you are so grateful for all that you have and all that you have accomplished and all that you have achieved, that you want to share with others and you want to uplift others and you want to be with others and you want to bring others with you, which is why during the course of getting a divorce, the one thing I learned was that I was going to be happy no matter what happened, because the happier I got, the more I got. The happier I felt, the better I was, the better client I was for my lawyers, the better mother I was to my son, the better decisions that I made, because I wasn't running out of fear of failure, out of guilt, out of a misplaced belief that I owed someone outside of me some kind of explanation for my behavior. I was moving towards happiness. I was moving towards goals for me and my child that were going to make us happy. Was it always easy? Good gracious, no. But the consequences of my life always rested with me. So it stands to reason that since I had to embrace all the consequences, I was for sure going to embrace the good. And that's the key. If you've got to embrace the consequences of every bad decision that's made, you also get to embrace the rewards for every good decision that you make. And I would say to you, focus on the good decisions and the rewards that come from that. And you'll find you have a lot less consequences to worry about. You just do. It's kind of the law of cause and effect, right? If I do these good things and take care of myself, the effect is going to be a better life, which means a better life for my kids and a better life for me, a better life for those I care about. Keep focusing on owing yourself, and you will find you never have to owe anyone else. And in the future, when you decide to partner up with a new person and let them into your happiness and let them come into your joy, you will find that your feet are firmly set and you are ready, willing, and able to open the door to love again, because the love will be on a footing that is perfect for you. You will know who you are. You won't need someone to come along and tell you who you are. You will know what you need. You won't need someone to come along and tell you what you need. You will know where you are going. You will not need someone to come along and tell you where you were going. What you will need is someone to go the rest of your way with. One of my favorite people in the world, hands down, anyone who knows me, is Tina Turner. And when she married her longtime companion, Erwin Bach, what she said that I love is that they got married and now they will go the rest of their way together, because these are two people who don't owe each other anything except a promise to always be happy so that the other can share in that happiness. And when you come at life with the decision that happiness is what you're going to pursue, pleasure is what you're going to pursue, then you invite other people to come into that life with you and go the rest of the way with you. And you also realize that means that some people won't get an invitation, and that is okay. So this has been the 5 simple truths on the path to freedom after divorce. Some of them are hard to swallow. Some of them are controversial, but they're the simple truths that I figured out when I was going through my own divorce, when I was trying to figure out what it was going to look like and who I was going to be in a little town in the middle of Washington State with a 2-year-old baby. And they worked for me. And they worked to remind me when I am struggling to want to get through the moments that pleasure is my birthright. I have good people. I owe no one anything. I have found my God, and she is beautiful. She is lovely, and she finds me every time. And most importantly, though it may always be something, not everything is my thing to solve. It's been Dr. Sasheen. I hope that you find and have found some useful information. So great to be back in season 2. Looking forward to all that we're going to talk about this season. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you hear your podcasts on. Also, the new book is out. Who Did You Love? 4 Faces of Narcissism, which really fits in well with the idea of who do we owe and who did we love. Pick it up on Amazon and the first book, So You're Getting Divorced, that this podcast is based on. Have a great week, everyone. I'll see you soon. And that, as they say, is the tea. Thanks for tuning in this week. To get more, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, LinkedIn, and coming soon, Patreon, for those who want to subscribe and who want to support this podcast. If you have any questions, please contact me at support@sasheenmobley.com. And as always, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment so that we can continue to rise in the rankings. That's it for this week. Take care. See you next time. Bye.